When you're starting an artist project, it's almost like you're creating your own character for like a novel or a film. And that's kind of fun and exciting. And to me, is creative in another exciting way, just like music is. So it's almost like, who is this character that you want to create? And oftentimes it's just taking certain parts of your persona and amplifying them, right? So it's like, what are some things already that make you a little unique or different? Can you just lean into those a little bit more and just amplify them a bit? And then boom, you kind of have your whole artist persona.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Headliner Mindset Podcast. Today's guest is a truly prolific artist and visionary, someone who has mastered the ability to take fans on an emotional journey through his music. His cinematic approach to melodic techno has found him releasing on some of the biggest labels in the scene, headlining dates all across the U.S. and playing alongside industry heavyweights like deadmau5, Eric Prydz, and Rufus Du Sol. This is Rinzen.
Hello, what's up, Nick?
What's up, brother? So good to see you, man. I'm glad we could finally get you on.
I know, likewise. You were just mentioning before we started some of your guests you've known for 10 years. And now I'm thinking, actually, I've known you for almost 10 years. I think 9 years. I think I was at Icon in like 2015.
Yeah. Been about that long, man. And you certainly have come a long way in the last 10 years.
Yeah, thank you. I mean... Going to Icon, that was a whole pivotal moment, just deciding to become an artist. And then, yeah, it's a long process, as you know.
Yeah. And I want to dig into that. I want to talk about your story and share some of that part of it. But right now, I am just so excited to catch you in this moment because I've been talking to you for a while about getting on the podcast. You were one of the first guys I was like, bro, I got to get you on. But you're like, Nick, I'm in album mode. I got the blinders on. Don't talk to me for a couple months, and I'm going to come out of my cave, and we'll do this later. And so now, here we are. The album is out. I want to start off by celebrating and saying congratulations. You just dropped your album on, Friday, right?
Yeah, exactly.
A couple days ago.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you, man. As you said, I'm out of the cave. Definitely most of last year was spent just finishing up the album and finalizing it. And yeah, saying no to a lot of things that I would have loved to do as well. But, there's something to be said about going monk mode and going all in on something, especially when it comes time to finalizing something. So
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, look, this is a big moment of celebration. Any of my clients know, and people that have been listening to the podcast know, that I'm really big on creating a culture of celebration. I do believe in the law of attraction and manifestation, and whatever you focus on grows bigger. So when we focus on what's going well and we actually celebrate stuff, we attract more things into our life to celebrate. And this is also a very special moment for me because this is episode 52 of the Headliner Mindset Podcast. We have officially been doing this for a whole year. So it's extra special. I get to have you on as you're dropping your album, as I'm wrapping up a year. Let's fucking go, baby. Let's
go. That's awesome, man. First off, yeah, congrats. Doing anything consistently is difficult, and to do a podcast every week for 52 weeks straight, that's definitely something to celebrate. So I commend you on that. Yeah. And I also think I'm not good at always celebrating or acknowledging the victories, Like, I feel like a lot of good things happen, but my mind's always like, well, we got to start planning for the next thing already. And It's really hard for me just to stop and be like, take a breath, the album's out, celebrate it,
Yeah. This is one of the biggest things I call my clients out on, because I think for so many people, it's just so common. It's like, okay, I check that off my list, and automatically it's like, okay, what's next? And that's great. That's a great high performance, high achiever kind of a mindset. But also we can kind of be on a endless hamster wheel that way, And we got to stop and smell the fucking roses sometimes. So did you do anything to celebrate this album coming out? Did you go, get a fucking steak dinner or drink a beer? Like what'd you do to celebrate this?
So actually I did have some friends take me out the night before, just for dinner. I just thought we were going to get dinner as friends, and then they ended up like just buying me dinner essentially, and we were celebrating it, and that was kind of unexpected. So that was nice. That was nothing I planned for. And then, I don't think I did a good job of celebrating it because, to be honest, even though the album came out, like I was so wrapped up in like pushing the album on release day and sharing it and trying to tell the story of the album. And it's almost like your birthday or like a wedding. You're just getting like all these messages from friends and like family members, and you're getting this outpouring of love. So you want to reciprocate and like get back to everyone. So my headspace on the album day and the day after was honestly a little bit like frenetic. Like I was just bouncing around, trying to be everywhere and respond to everyone and celebrate the album with everyone. But I don't know. I don't feel like I took that moment to like fully do something for myself. And then I also I got to record a live set in the desert yesterday. And that was like, I had to prepare that the whole weekend after the album came out. So it's been nonstop. I don't feel like I've had that moment to reward myself yet. Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm declaring that for this next hour, we get to celebrate you. We're going to have that moment, man. Now. We're going to start the celebration with this podcast, with this hour. I love that comparison to a wedding because you always hear how people are like, kind of like don't enjoy their weddings sometimes. They're like, we just spent so much time and energy and money and we're just planning, and like most people are just like stressed the fuck out and they get to the wedding and they're just kind of like happy that the wedding is over. So I could kind of see how it would be similar with the album. There's a lot of work that goes into obviously not just making it, but it's like, okay, well now you gotta promote it and kind of still be in work mode.
Yeah, and you have really high expectations for the day of, right? Just like a wedding. They're like, oh, everything has to be perfect. You have to look perfect and the things you say have to be perfect. And you want to receive all this nice positive attention, especially when it's an album. Yeah. So it was a little bit, no, I mean, I definitely still enjoyed it. And I'm definitely really enjoying it now. But yeah, it's hard to be present in that moment, I guess, because you're feeling a little overwhelmed.
Yeah. So I want to know, what had you decide that it was time for an album? Because I hear there's different trains of thought. Obviously the EDM industry especially is very much a singles driven business, and some artists are just like, it's not even worth doing an album, because it's just a different release model as opposed to like, let's just keep putting out singles and that will stretch out over a year or whatever. So what made you decide that you were going to do a full album and just drop all of these songs at once?
Yeah, there were two things. I think my artist persona is divided between like my marketing brain and my creative brain, right? So if I were to think of it from my marketing brain, I've been releasing singles and EPs since 2017. It's all been good. It's all been really helpful. I've got to work with like 15 or 20 different labels, like a ton of labels. But I'm constantly asking myself, like, what are the things we can do as an artist that actually move the needle? And, there's only a handful of things. You can have a hit, which is really hard to do. You can go on tour supporting like some gigantic artist. Maybe you can get like the dream booking agent. Or in my mind, you can like write an album, and you can write like a good album. That kind of thing can actually like move the needle on your career. So I had just been playing the single EP game for a few years, and I was like, I think I want to do a larger statement. It's like it gives your whole team something to build around. You can build a tour around it. A label's going to invest in you more, and maybe they're putting you on the road more. They're putting more dollars behind you as an artist. They're making you a bigger part of that label. So from a marketing perspective, it just made a lot of sense to me, and it just felt like time to try that. But from the inception of having that thought, it took about 2 years for me to actually finish the thing and for it to come out. So it's an investment of time. But then on the creative side, the artist side, I've always been driven to works that have more of a concept or a theme or a larger story connecting the songs together. And an album is, the best way to do that. I've done that in smaller scales of just like a concept EP, and you get to build out this little world. But with an album, you really get to tell this longer story across 3 singles and then the album release and the album artwork and the single artwork. And, you can really create just like this larger vision for something. So that's very compelling to me. So for both those reasons, it made a lot of sense to do the album.
Yeah. Yeah. And you've always had that literally from the very beginning. I think the first EP you ever did, it wasn't just music. There was a vision and there was a story and even just the artwork, it's like you've always had that. I'm kind of curious about just your vision for this project in the beginning, because it kind of seems like you always had it figured out. Like there, it doesn't seem to me that you were like, oh, I'm kind of figuring out who I am as an artist. It kind of seemed like you knew who you were from the very beginning. It's been so cohesive, and you've always had that storytelling element. You've always had the visual stuff like really there. So has that always been there? Like, take me back to when you actually launched this thing and your vision for it.
Sure. I actually think maybe my most creative point was right before I launched my career, because in that kind of infantile stage as an artist, you're thinking about what you want to be, what you could be, and you're just dreaming as big as possible. So I was watching all these different like YouTube videos on like creativity and on marketing ideas and how to like create like some cool compelling vision. And it just inspired me to really spend a dedicated amount of time thinking about how crazy can my project be, how conceptual or thematic can it be, what do I want it to look like, what do I want it to sound like, what do I want to dress like, how do I want to talk. I went as far as like writing all of that stuff out in great detail, like almost like a manifesto.
Yeah.
And this is before I'd even put out any music or signed anything. This was just to really be clear about like, what am I actually trying to build? So when it did come time to actually release music, I just already had this game plan of, I want to write music that's tied to some conceptual world and build these stories and narratives around them. And it was just always baked into the DNA of it. But, again, that was all due to just putting in that work before I'd even launched the career.
Yeah, and it shows. It totally shows. And it's so cool to hear you say that, because it really makes sense. Because like I said, from the very beginning, it just seemed like you knew who you were, you knew what you were creating, you knew what you were all about. And so I'm not surprised at all to hear that you really put the effort into that before. And I think this is such a missing link for a lot of artists. A lot of artists are just not doing that. They're not sitting down to write out their 10-page manifesto about the vision, and even like you said, how you're going to appear, what you're going to wear, all of those details. I think they just make it so much more potent, when you really know, like, this is the target I'm aiming for and where I'm aligning my energy, as opposed to just like, oh, I'm kind of just trying shit out and figuring it out along the way. Like, you did a great job with that. So I'm not surprised to hear that you put that effort in.
Thanks, man. I grew up studying English literature and studying these crazy characters and novels. And to me, when you're starting an artist project, it's almost like you're creating your own character for like a novel or a film. And that's kind of fun and exciting. And to me is creative in another exciting way, just like music is. So it's almost like, who is this character that you want to create? And oftentimes it's just taking certain parts of your persona and amplifying them, right? So it's like, what are some things already that make you a little unique or different? Can you just lean into those a little bit more and just amplify them a bit? And then boom, you kind of have your whole artist persona.
Yeah. Yeah. And what was that for you? What do you think were the parts of you that you were like, ooh, I'm going to turn the volume up on this and really bring this out into the brand?
Definitely. It was the love of like film and literature. So it just became, the whole project became very cinematic, borrowing stuff from kind of like movie scores and like Hans Zimmer type compositions and John Williams and whatnot. So there was that. And there's also like my fascination with like, science fiction and like the Matrix type stuff and bringing some of that in. And then also I was a music journalist and writer kind of before I was making music. So integrating that and just whenever I feel inspired, actually taking the time to write out long form things, and it could be thoughts on the scene or thoughts on creativity, but also having this be just, a vehicle for me to put out some of my writing, I guess, as well.
Yeah, I was reflecting on that before we started. When I met you, 9 or 10 years ago, you were writing for Dancing Astronaut and doing articles about the scene and the industry and releases and whatnot. I imagine that helped you just kind of get your foot in the door and probably make certain connections in the beginning of your career as well. Because, I remember just seeing how quickly you launched and you were doing big things. You were very successful very quickly. So did being involved in the industry in a different capacity help you with that fast success that you experienced?
Yeah, it was huge. I mean, I'd been writing for 6 years before I launched my career, maybe even 7. And like 4 or 5 of those years were just unpaid. It was just doing it pure out of love, right? I was just writing articles about festivals and all my favorite artists and interviewing them. And through the course of like writing 2,000, maybe even 3,000 articles, yeah, I met so many people. I met so many artists. I met like managers and whatnot, and even some labels. And basically, I just done this for free for a lot of people and given them a lot of exposure. And not like I was looking for anything out of it. I just loved it so much. I just wanted to write about it. But when it came time to actually launch my own project, there were just a lot of people who genuinely wanted to support me because I'd kind of been there for them in other capacities with writing. Yeah. So, yeah, definitely right out the gates, it really helped. Even the first remix I ever signed was a remix of Giorgio Moroder. I had like interviewed him a few years earlier and stayed friends with his team and, written a bunch of features about him. So that kind of got me the opportunity to attempt to remix one of his songs. There wasn't like a guarantee they were going to sign it or anything, but that opened that door. And then even getting on Mousetrap in the beginning, I had written about a ton of Mousetrap artists, and one of them in particular, this artist named Black Gummy, who actually went to Icon as well. Yeah. He and his team, I sent them my music initially, and they're the ones that passed it on the Mousetrap. So, a lot of it was from the network that I'd built over like 5 or 6 years. Yeah. And yeah, I can't discredit that. It was hugely helpful.
Well, this is such a relationship-driven business, and that networking pillar, I always say there's five main pillars to like what it takes to be successful: mindset, music, branding, marketing, and networking. Those are the 5 areas that we really have to focus on. Maybe there's more. Also, I think being a badass DJ is probably part of it too. Performing, I think, would be maybe number 6. But, as they say, it's all about who you know. And so to have that foundation laid, but also from a place of genuine passion and just like service, like you said, you were working for free. You were just helping people, right? Not because, I want to get something from these people someday, but you were part of the scene and you were contributing to the scene. You were helping build the scene in the community. And that's a very common story I see a lot. And I've been hearing more in these interviews is like, like Bijou, he was a promoter first. He was, out there handing out fucking flyers and like throwing shows and throwing parties and just like being involved in the scene, building relationships, making those connections, but also just like pouring that energy into it and then being able to receive that energy back later down the road.
Yeah, it's huge. I give that advice to a lot of people. I was like, find a way to be involved in just your local scene, even if it's just helping them out, however they need help at the party or whatever, working the door. Yeah, find a way to contribute to the scene, as you're saying, in another way than just being a DJ. And naturally, you'll get more DJ opportunities.
Yeah, go, set up some fucking speakers and plug in some cables and sweep the floors, like take some tickets, whatever. There's plenty of opportunities to get involved. This is a community at the end of the day, right? So be a part of the community. And I think there's a balance where you also got to lock yourself in the studio and not be out too much. Like you got to put in the hours in the studio. But I think there's a lot of great producers out there that are really good at making music, but they're so disconnected from the scene and they don't know anybody in the scene and they don't go out, they don't go to shows. And it's like, well, if you want to be playing shows and you want to be part of the community, you got to get out of the fucking house sometimes too, right?
Yeah, totally. It's picking your battles. There's like a time and place to like do, as I was saying earlier, like go into the cave, go monk mode, just make your best music possible. But then there's a time and a place where you have to be out there and kind of meeting the right people too. It's so much like, finding the people who want to believe in your vision and want to elevate you and support you. we were just shooting this thing in the desert yesterday, and I'm working with this very cool like music video director, and he's doing some film stuff too. And like many years ago, he did my first music video for like no money, just because he wanted to like help and support me. And I'd met him at some, event just being out. But like the more you can find those people who are very talented, but really just believe in what you're doing and want to help you, like you need that. And you're not going to get that if you're never leaving the house.
Yeah. Yeah. And then just being a good person and being cool helps a lot too.
Oh yeah.
Like it goes a long way. Like just make friends, like so much. I think that's what so much of this is about. I think that's probably, you and I both, I think, share that common characteristic where we're just generally friendly people and we like meeting people and we enjoy developing those, relationships because I don't know, man, it's like it should be fun, like working with your friends is fun and making new friends is fun. I think that's not everybody is super extroverted, right? But I would encourage people to for those that maybe feel like they're not super extroverted, I think it's important to also understand that everybody in the scene they're passionate about the same things that you are, so maybe if it's a little intimidating to like go out there and like meet people and maybe go to a show and shake some hands, it's like, remember, like these people all love the same shit that you do. We all love dance music and we're all about the same thing. So I think most people are probably more approachable than you might think, even though it can be intimidating sometimes.
Yeah, I'd say actually like 90% of the people in the music industry are introverts, and that's why everyone's kind of awkward in the club or backstage. But for me, I definitely place myself in that category as well. But like a club is like actually the one place where I feel extroverted because I feel like, I'm home. Like they're playing my type of music. I feel knowledgeable about it. This is my area of expertise. Like I feel extra confident in those scenarios, and everywhere else in life, that's when I feel like more introverted and like, oh, maybe I'm out of place here. So It's almost like embracing that, no, that's kind of your domain. So it's okay to step in there with a bit more confidence,
Yeah, yeah. And I know that obviously being a part of the club scene, club culture, especially for people that, aren't maybe naturally extroverted, it's very normal and very easy to go have some drinks and get some of that little, social lubrication. That makes it way easier, right? As we also know, that can be a slippery slope to, just, I don't know, just it can become unhealthy at some point. It can slow you down at some point. I know that you stopped drinking. I saw you post that you had stopped drinking 2 years ago?
Yeah, 2 years and some change now.
Yeah. So what inspired that decision? Was it starting to get in the way, or was it just like no longer serving you?
Yeah, I would say no longer serving me. It was just, I wasn't even drinking that much by the point that I stopped, but it was enough that it was kind of hampering my life. I really try to just prioritize my energy, right? Like I want as much energy as possible to pursue this career, to make this dream happen. And for me, drinking was just taking away from some of that energy. Basically anything in my life that's taking away from that energy, I try to remove and just amplify the things that are giving me more energy to put into this career.
Yeah.
And doubly so when you're an artist that's traveling a good bit and you're getting on airplanes. Drinking is just a nightmare. It's just like you play your set, maybe you're having a couple drinks during the set, totally fine, but then you finish and now you're in this elevated spirit and you've got all this extra dopamine and endorphins, so you want to drink more because you're celebrating and you have friends and they're like, that was so sick, so you're all together, and now it's 2 a.m. and you're having a couple more drinks. Maybe you only have 4 or 5 drinks, but then you have a flight at 11 a.m. or even if it's not till noon or 1 p.m., maybe you only get 6 hours of sleep, but it's not good sleep because it's alcohol sleep. Yeah. And then you've got to get on a plane and you're tired and hungover, and maybe you have another gig that night, and maybe you're just going home, but now that whole day is shot. So it's just kind of an ugly cycle. At least it was for me. So even though I didn't feel like I was drinking too much, it was enough that it wasn't serving me and I wasn't happy with how I felt. And it's just easier to have a blanket policy of not drinking at all versus just I have a little bit here, I'll have a little bit there, because, sometimes it ends up being a little bit more.
Yeah.
So So yeah, it's been a little over 2 years now, and yeah, loving it.
Yeah, I'm the same. It's like it's just gotta be a no. Any of that little wiggle room is a dangerous place, you know.
Yeah.
But it's interesting, you know. Obviously, I've had so many artists talk about this as well because this is like the one career, and I'm just thinking about this for the first time. Whereas most people are working like a 9 to 5, and then you're done at 5 o'clock on Friday, and now it's like, okay, I got 2 days. I could just go fucking chill. I can go out on Friday night and you know, have a little mimosa brunch the next day, and it doesn't matter. You're off, as opposed to like you start work Friday night at 5 o'clock. You know,
Right.
like that's when you start. That's when you're on. And so it's such a backwards way of operating, I think, compared to, you know, the, you know, normal sort of, you know, 9 to 5ers. And so I love what you said about maximizing your energy, because that's something I talk about a lot with my clients is, if you want to achieve your biggest dreams and goals, it's going to take so much time and so much energy, right? Like an extra amount of time and energy. And so maximizing your energy and really prioritizing your energy to be able to show up, put in those hours, be focused, be disciplined, be creative, stay inspired. You know, it's like, this isn't a job that you can come in and just clock in and be like, all right, I'm going to show up today and just be like, whatever, do some fucking boring data entry and like not have to really think or be creative. It's like, no, you need to be in like a good energetic state. Like if your energy sucks, your music is going to suck. You know, you're not going to make anything really that great. So I love to hear you talk about prioritizing your energy. And I will say, I've also seen that from a distance. My boy's been getting jacked out here too. I've been seeing you like in the, you know, seeing you just in the gym. You're doing something, man, because like you put on some size. You just like, you look like you're in really good shape. So I can tell you've been prioritizing your health. Tell me a little bit about your health journey, because I just saw a fucking picture one day. I was like, my boy's got some fucking guns now. Where did these come from?
It's funny. So much of my Instagram has been people commenting about that and stuff. But yeah, I am obsessed with just kind of health and wellness culture in general. I just want to feel my best every day, ultimately, so I can make my best music. And, you know, eating well, eating super clean, exercising a ton, you know, being outside in the sun a lot, spending time reading, trying to get good sleep and stuff and see friends. All of it, to me, it leads to better creativity, better music, and just kind of better fulfillment in life. So I feel like every year I'm just getting more and more like dialed into that stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, the gym is great because, you know, it just allows me to like release a lot of energy as well. I think when you're working on music for whatever 5-6 hours in the day, it's like so much mental energy and your brain's just going and going and going. And then you can just go to the gym and just like totally let that go and just like lift some heavy fucking weights. And it really just like settles everything down for me. And it's like the exact opposite of what I've been doing during the day. So yeah, I genuinely, I like it and gives me energy.
Yeah. What's your day-to-day, week-to-week kind of routine and schedule look like? I'd love to hear about how you actually approach your day and making music and how you fit in like your health and wellness and maximizing your energy in that.
Yeah. Well, first off, I've been thinking about this today. It's like life is so seasonal. It's like while I was making the album, I really didn't have much to do other than like make the album. So I lived a very luxurious life of just like, you know, I'd like get some good sleep. I'd go to the studio and like set up all my gear just so it's ready. I'd even have Ableton on ready to go. And then I would leave the studio. I'd go to a coffee shop and I like would read a book in the sun for like an hour and just really kind of relax and get my brain going, get really focused and spend some time away from my phone. Then I'd come back to the studio, make music for like 4 or 5 hours. And like that would be my whole day. And then, you know, I would just kind of finish early, maybe go to the beach or something. So now life has been a lot busier and the albums come out and I'm doing so many other things around that I haven't been able to have that kind of nice, just like very simplistic, minimalist, creative life. But in my best times, it's the former. It's what I was saying. There's not much to do in the day. As long as I just get, honestly, just even 4 good hours of working on music, if I can do that every day, I can move mountains. You know, that's enough to like do some serious work. And I really prioritize making those hours as good as possible. So like, yeah, I could push through and work 6 or 7 hours, but the quality is going to degrade. I'd much rather do everything I can in my day to make sure that like 4-hour block in the middle is incredible as possible. So that's why I kind of take my time in the morning, have a good breakfast. I spend that time at my coffee shop sitting in the sun, just like my mind is getting ready. It's getting in a focused state. So like, bam, when I come into the studio, it's just like lightning for 4 hours and I'm just hyper focused. I'm literally not thinking about anything else. And that's when I think I can do my best work. And then, after I've done that, then I can go to the gym. I can go see friends. I can cook a good dinner, basically set myself up just to do it again the next day.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I mean, that's the whole concept of deep work.
Yes, Cal Newport.
Yeah, right. To have like really, it could be a shorter amount of time, but it's the quality of the time that you're putting in, right? 4 hours of being 100% focused versus 8 hours of like kind of half-ass, distracted on social media, low energy kind of work is going to get very, very different results, because I love that, like, you can also shut it down and be done and be like, okay, now I'm going to go live my life and I'm going to go, see my friends and have a relationship and go to the beach and go to the gym. And that's where you get to refill your cup, right? So that you can come back the next day. And I think a lot of people are stretching themselves so thin and they're like, oh, I got to put in all these hours and, the quantity of hours versus the quality of hours, the quality of your energy is going to make such a difference, man. So I love that. I think you've really cracked the code there, really dialing that in.
Yeah. But again, I acknowledge like that is a privilege to be able to do that on a daily basis. And, if you have a job that requires you to be online for like 7-8 hours, probably not possible to do that kind of thing. So I know how lucky that is. And again, that's in like my best state. I feel like there's other days where, we're doing meetings with the label or calls with my manager and my team. And maybe I only get a good 2 or 3 hours in. And maybe hopefully it's deep work, but maybe my brain's also thinking about these other things. So I'm human as well, and I have other responsibilities, but definitely my favorite times are if I can just do a whole week or 2 or 3 weeks of just that, I am happy as a clam. My brain is buzzing. I'm like walking every day thinking like, oh man, life is beautiful. I just get to make music. So like I said, it's seasonal.
Well, it sounds like you just need to make another album then.
I mean, that's the thing I've realized too, is I really do enjoy the process of making an album, and I want to be an album artist, and that's definitely the plan. I'm not ready to start the next one yet because I'm still doing a lot of other stuff.
You haven't celebrated enough yet. We're not
I haven't.
You got to celebrate more. But I mean, it's a totally different approach. This is how a major label album cycle like bands would work, right? You go in the studio for 6 months and work on your album, and then you go tour for 6 months, right? And then you come back, and it's a different model than the DJ world, which is like put out a track every single month and like push this boulder up the hill and keep going and stay relevant and go DJ every weekend, right? It's a little different, and I think it's good to see like that it's possible to create your lifestyle and your system in a way that serves you best. Do you have to play the game the same way that everybody else is doing? I don't think so. I think it's possible to do it a different way.
That's what I like about the author Cal Newport we've kind of been talking about with deep work. He is so much more a proponent of like, it's okay if you disappear for a bit to like make your best work, because ultimately like putting out the highest quality of your work, like the work you can only do in a non-distracted flow state, that's going to move the needle more than just like that, like we're saying, that like hyper wanting to just do as much as possible, put out a single every week, every month. That's just going to add to the noise a bit. But like taking the time to like really do something different or remarkable, even though it can seem like a longer path, will actually be a shorter path because it's going to actually like move the needle more,
Yeah. Great point. So I want to come back to talking about this amazing album that I just had the privilege of sitting down and listening to from beginning to end, which is so cool, and this is something that I think as fans we maybe sometimes lose sight of is the experience of listening to an album, right? Like actually carving out an hour to be like, I'm going to experience this journey. We don't do it that often anymore because, again, we are kind of living more in this singles-driven business. So even as fans, we're consuming content in that way and consuming music in that way. I mean, content is like shit. You get 30 seconds on an Instagram scroll, like it's so short form and so ADD now. But yesterday, I listened to your album just beginning to end, and it's so good. It's so good. Man. First off, let me just say that. Something that I noticed about it is, I'm here in Austin, Texas, and we just had the eclipse pass through on Monday, and I got to watch this total eclipse, and I wasn't really that hyped about it at first. I was like, oh, whatever, like it's an eclipse. Like I didn't really know how fucking cool it was going to be. And I watched this thing happen, and it just stopped me in my tracks, and it made me feel emotional. It made me feel something deep inside my soul. And it was very hard to explain. It's hard to describe, but it was powerful, and it was felt at this like core level. And I find it kind of ironic, and I don't know if you planned this, but your album cover is an eclipse. Right? Yeah. Did you plan it like to release on the same week as this? Because also it's like what I'm getting at also is when I was listening to your album, I had the same feeling where it was like, I'm not just listening to music with my mind, but it's touching a fucking deep part of my heart and of my soul, on like just such a deeper level. And so first off, was that intentional? Did you release this around the eclipse time? And second, I want to learn about how you access those parts of yourself in your music, because it's a different level of depth than most people are doing.
Oh, well, first off, thank you. And I'm flattered that you took the time to carve out that album listening time and give it, your attention. I'm getting all these messages again from like friends and fans and stuff about the album, and that people are really enjoying it and like took the time to listen. And that to me, that's all you can really ask for is like you're saying, it's we're so busy, and for someone to give you their time, like an hour to really listen to something, that's asking a lot. And I genuinely appreciate that from you and everyone else. For your questions, no, I did not plan that with the eclipse. That was just beautiful serendipitous timing.
Good.
Yeah, that could not have worked out better, to be honest.
Yeah, that's perfect.
And then the album art, I always knew I wanted to have it be like space themed and like some cosmic art. And we were just playing around with a bunch of different things. I was showing the album artist, a guy named Adam Marshall, who did the cover, just a bunch of cool space imagery from like NASA and like the James Webb Telescope and stuff. Just a lot of like nebula shots and like just cool galaxy shots and some black hole stuff. And then he kind of fused this thing that's like combining a lot of that. And yeah, it's a very cool mix where it's got like the solar eclipse kind of ring, but then it's kind of like a black hole in the middle, but then has like some nebula tendrils and gases. So it's a mix of all that stuff. And yeah, it was just kind of divine timing. And then the second part of your question, how it kind of accessed, I guess, those kind of feelings or emotions. The longer I make music, the more I realize the importance of the raw emotion of a song. And that's, for me, just become the focal point of like most songs that I'm writing, and specifically album tracks. And I was just thinking about all the songs that I return to the most are ones that make me really feel something emotionally. Like it could be like a Rai X song, like his song Berlin, which is just him singing over like an acoustic guitar, and it's not even a good recording, but it just has so much raw emotion to it that I can listen to that song, for any time. Or it could be an electronic song like Strobe or something, where just the melody always makes me feel something. Ooh, so it's just
one of my favorite songs ever. I still rinse that, dude. That's such a classic. Yeah.
Right, because the musicality is so good and just makes us feel something. So my focus on this album was like, how can I elicit more emotion And for me, that's like really focusing on chords, really focusing on melodies, starting to work with vocals a ton more. And then also just giving myself the freedom just to make electronic music, not to have to make club music. So maybe the song doesn't need some 1 minute kick drum intro and kick drum outro. It can just start from cool chords, and maybe it has an ambient breakdown in the middle, or maybe the whole intro is like a minute and a half and not much is happening. Just it could be anything. And that is so liberating because you're not confined by having to make club music, and a lot of the music I play in my sets and can work in those environments, and that's in my DNA. But I just wanted to make compelling electronic music and stuff that I could return to, years down the line and still appreciate. So it was just a totally different approach for me.
What advice would you give to somebody who wants to bring more emotion into their music?
I would say really focus on the musicality. Like I tend to start all my songs with chords now. And just because you have chords or a melody doesn't mean the song has to come across as like cheesy or commercial or overly musical. Like you can sound design the shit out of those chords and melody and make it so it doesn't even sound like chords, but it can still have this kind of emotional energy attached to it. So I'd say it's really about finding the seed of the track or the essence of the track. What is the song actually? Like there has to be some core of it that's making you feel something. And yet maybe it doesn't have to be a chord. Maybe it's just a vocal phrase or shout, or maybe it is just a crazy beat, but it just makes you really feel some way. But it's like focusing on the intensity of the emotion just in the beginning. Like spend like the majority of the time at the beginning just finding like the emotion of that track and what it wants to be. And then you can arrange it 1,000 different ways. You can swap in different drums. You can do different sound design, but it has to be saying something from the beginning,
Yeah. I was literally just recording a video for my group coaching program this morning, pulling some Art of Flow influence, the class from Icon Collective that I used to teach, where we talk about duality with like the feminine energy being the more heart and soul like feeling, as opposed to the masculine energy being more of like the structure and the intellectual thinking.
Yeah, analytical.
Right. And it's like, okay, the core, the beginning, you've got to start with that feminine. You got to start with like the flow and the inspiration and just like, where's that ooey gooey fucking magic, right? Like harness that little lightning from the sky and bring it down, and then add some structure to it, right? The structure is like, how do you actually kind of package this and turn this into a song and market it and put it out, to the world? Okay. But a lot of people are only doing that sort of intellectual side of it. I always look at like the intellectual masculine energy side of music production is being a producer. It's the math and science, right? But the feminine side is the heart and the soul and the flow and the energy, right? And I think that's being an artist. There's a difference between being a producer and being an artist. Being an artist is when you can really tap into that energy and find that. And like you said, like that's got to be the seed. That's the core. That's got to be the starting point. And then you can build it from there.
Yeah.
Right?
I also think there's a lot of benefit in divorcing those processes. Like you're saying, like in the beginning, I'm not thinking analytically at all. I'm just trying to capture lightning in a bottle, kind of as you were saying as well, like just capture that feeling in that moment. And that's the most exciting part of writing a song, because in that beginning phase, it can be anything. And your mind is running with fantasy about like, ooh, I could do this and this and this. And you're just capturing all these different ideas and getting them down. And it doesn't have to have a form yet. And then, eventually, once you've gotten all that and there's nothing more to get down from your subconscious or from wherever, then, you can switch into that more analytical, structural part of your brain. And then that for me is a hard part, because it's like now you're taking something that's infinite and you have to make it finite and material and limited. And that's why I think a lot of artists struggle to finish tracks, because they're trying to branch the infinite to the finite. And it's like, it can be a harsh reality, because this fantasy you constructed of this song is now becoming this 4-minute house and techno track that is no longer infinite, but can only have a certain amount of songs and has to have a good mix down and has to have a playable intro and outro. So I think a lot of artists get disenchanted right at that phase, and that's why they're not able to finish things. So I try to explain that kind of that duality between that beginning point and the end, and that everyone has to like bridge that gap if you ever want the song to actually come out and for people to hear it.
Yeah, beautifully said, you know, and I think it's when you step into that stage of the intellectual side of it, which is also the ego, right? That's when the mind and the ego becomes involved. There's also this attachment to making the right decision and making the best decision. And, you know, now as we approach that later half of it, we start thinking about how is this going to be received? What are people going to think of it, right? It's like once we start getting into the head, all that stuff exists inside the head, you know, the good, the bad, and the ugly, all that necessary intellectual math and science of how do we get this across the finish line, but also like all of the fear and all of the doubt and all the mental muckiness that's in there as well.
Right. Yeah. And even me, I've been producing for like 12 years now. I still have those thoughts. I'll write a song and I'm really excited by the chord progression, and immediately my brain's like, ooh, I could send this to this label and this label. And I have to turn that part of my brain off and be like, no. There's no song yet. We've just written a chord progression. Like, calm down. Let me write the song.
So
how do you finish it?
How do you turn that part of your brain off, though? Like, what do you do in those moments?
I acknowledge that this is not a song yet. It's just a chord progression. When it's actually finished, or like mostly finished, then I can start to entertain those ideas. But until then, me getting that excited could actually hamper the process, because it can make me put in less effort. I can be like, ooh, it's already really good. I've already got the melody and chord progression. I don't have to work that hard to finish it because I got the good thing, you know? Yeah. So if I want it to be as good as possible, I have to like be like, no. I don't have a song yet. I have a good component. Let me get more good components. And can I make this even better, you know? Because I'm sure a lot of artists have also had the experience. You think you've struck gold, and then you go to arrange it, and you just can't crack it, or it's just not as good as you thought, and then you're like, now you're disappointed. So it's trying to put the brakes on that voice and just be like, just wait till it's done. Then we'll see how good it is and where it can go.
Yeah. And I think, you know, I label that voice as being the ego, just that little inner dialogue, right? And I always say that the ego is like a puppy, where you're never going to kill the ego. People talk about like, oh, kill the ego. It's like, no, that voice is always going to be there. You're not going to kill your puppy. What you need to do is you need to train it, right? You need to train it. If you don't train it, it's going to run around and piss and shit all over the house. It's going to mess you up, right? And when it comes time to entering the studio, I think it's a good practice just to say, hey, I'm going to leave you at the door. You don't get to come in here. Like, little puppy, you stay in the other room. Daddy will be back when he's done with his work that he has to do, but like, you don't get to come in here, you know? And easier said than done, but to be able to kind of like distinguish that and separate that a little bit, like just noticing like, okay, that voice is there. The voice that wants me to get signed to a label and succeed and be accepted and all of that. Okay, it's there. Can I recognize it? And also be the master of it rather than the slave, and say, hey, I've trained this thing well enough to know, like, okay, I hear you barking, but you're going to go wait outside, right? I'll be back later. Yeah,
that's funny. It really reminds me of Elizabeth Gilbert, another one of my favorite authors, and she wrote a book called Big Magic, which you've probably read. She has a similar analogy where she's like, if you're an artist, it's like you're going on a road trip, and you've got creativity in the front seat. But no matter what, like, fear is coming along on the road trip too, and fear is going to be in the back seat no matter what. Like, you can't leave fear out. Fear is always going to come with you. But like, you can set some ground rules. Like, fear doesn't get to like set the radio or tell you where you're going. They're going to come along, but they don't get to make the decisions. So it's very similar to what you're saying with ego. Like, just acknowledge that's still going to be there, but it's like, how can we manage that, or you be aware of it?
Totally. Yeah, that's a great point. That the fear is always going to be there. Self-doubt is always going to be there. Like, imposter syndrome is always going to be there. And you hear big artists talk about it all the time. They're like, I'm the biggest artist in the world. They're like, yeah, I still doubt myself. I still get scared. I still have fear. I still go on stage and been fucking freaked out, even though I've done this tons of times. It's like, it's just, that's part of the human experience. And I think the more we accept it, because we want to fight it. We want it to go away. Like, oh, I don't ever want to feel bad. I don't ever want to have doubt. I don't ever want to have fear. And then that almost makes it worse. It's like what you resist persists. When we just accept, like, hey, this is part of being human. Accept it, love it. Can we even laugh at it? I always like to look at myself. I'm like, when these thoughts go off, I'm like, look at you, fucking silly human, just being being so silly with your fear and your doubt. And like, can you laugh at yourself in those moments? That's my favorite thing to do. Is like, yeah, I'm just being a little fucking human with my fear and all my bullshit. It's part of the process. It's part of being human.
100% the best way. There's so many moments where I'm like finding myself complaining or worried about something, and then I'm like, wait a minute, if I just look objectively about like what I get to do in this life that I get to live, and even just standing outside in the sun and it's 72 degrees and I feel great, it doesn't matter what's going on. Like in this moment, everything is perfect. Like it's all mindset. There's always something we can be grateful for. There's always just like people who have it much worse off than us, and it's such a tricky thing because like you feel like you're on this artist ladder when you're on this career, and like you start from nothing and you're slowly going up and getting slightly higher on the festival lineups, and like you just feel like there's always another level, so you always feel like you're aspiring and still climbing. So I feel like you get so in your head of just like the comparison stuff, but then if you look down, like we're saying, like, wow, we've come a long way from where we started, and like I have friends who they're just now launching their career and they're looking up being like, oh my God, look at all these things you get to do. But in the moment, we're worried about like, oh, but how do we get to that next tier, next echelon?
Yeah.
It's endless.
Yeah. It's endless. Exactly. It never ends. And I think it's just whatever you focus on is real, right? Whatever you focus on is what you're going to feel. And if you focus on what you don't have and how other people are further along than you and how, we don't have X, Y, and Z, like, okay, well, that's going to be what's real. That's what we are, what we are making real, and ultimately what we are feeling. And then you can look in the other direction and look at like, wow, look at everything I have. Look at everything I've done. Look how far I've come. Yeah. Look how beautiful this flower is that I'm walking by right now. Look how beautiful the sun is, and whatever we focus on, we're going to feel. And I think like that's our superpower, man. Like outside of being an artist, just being like a human, right? Like there's obviously so many just challenges and struggles that every person is dealing with. And even just talking about, it's like just mental health. Like how do we help our brains be more healthy? So much of it boils down to what are we focusing on? A lot of us we're just very programmed and addicted to focusing on the wrong things. And the work really begins on, okay, can we start to, I think it is ultimately, it's like exercising a muscle, exercising our ability to focus on the things we want to be focusing on. Practicing gratitude, I think, is my favorite thing because I train myself to have my mind look at these things that are good and that I can be thankful for. And the more I practice that and train myself for that, it's like, okay, I actually generally just think more positively now. But it can very quickly and easily go in the opposite direction, and we can just always be focusing on the negative shit. And unfortunately, there's so much external programming that's just kind of blaring that in our face all the time too, so This is our essence of just self-mastery. It's like mastering where your focus goes.
I love the question of like what's going well in the moment. Like you can always kind of ask yourself that, and you can be like, actually there's a lot of things that are going well, even though I'm stressed out about this thing. Actually, we just did this, and I've got this beautiful relationship with this person, or I'm just talked to my parents and we're in a really good place, or I've got a lot of friends in my life, or I just love my daily existence. There's always things going well. And as you said, we can focus on that. And then the other thing, I feel like we're like dancing around the like Robert Greene and a lot of his ideas as well, especially when it comes to like mastery. But he talks about like envy is going to be like inevitable in this kind of hierarchical society that we're in. But if you can turn envy into admiration, like almost like alchemize it, that's a much more positive emotion. Because instead of saying, oh, I'm jealous of that thing, it's saying, oh, I really admire that person was able to do that and that they kind of put in the work to get that. And maybe I want that for myself too, but it doesn't mean like it has to be a negative thing. It's like, wow, I admire the path that they took to get there. Maybe I can like go on a similar path and also get there,
I'm so glad you said that, because it reminds me of one of the most powerful perspective shifts that I've ever been offered. One of my coaches pointed this out to me one time, where when we look at someone that has something that we want and we get envious and we get jealous from like an energetic law of attraction level, we're seeing somebody that has something that we want, and then we're feeling negative. We're feeling resentful. We're feeling jealous. We're feeling a low vibrational frequency. And so we're looking at this thing that we want, but with this negative feeling. So basically the universe is like, well, obviously you don't want that if you feel so bad about it. Right. As opposed to when we see somebody that is doing something that we want to do, or they have what we want to have. And back to this idea of celebration, like celebrate that shit. Like, hell yeah, good for you. Look at you getting after it. Cool. I'm now bringing myself into a higher vibrational frequency. And the universe is like, oh, okay, cool. Well, you obviously want some of that too. So let me go give some of it to you.
Yeah. Yeah. That's beautiful. We always talk about the word schadenfreude, which is like you're like taking pleasure in other people's misfortune. But then we never talk about the opposite, which is called like mitfreude, where you actually get like joy in people's fortune. Like you're saying, can you actually like celebrate when your friends are doing well? And, you know, especially as like an artist or DJ, there's so many artists that are on the same level. And maybe one of them like gets that sick DJ set at a festival. And your initial reaction is like, dang, why isn't that me? But can you flip it to like, wow, I'm stoked for my friend. They're getting to do this crazy cool thing like that. They must really want to do that. And like, I'm sure they're stoked. So it's like, can you remove that negative thing and just genuinely be happy for your friend? And then it makes you feel better about it. You can actually like talk to them about it. So definitely been trying to adopt that.
And I fucking guarantee you, on like a universal woo-woo level, when you start practicing celebrating other people's success, genuinely, you will start to have more success in your life. Like, maybe it's just some weird, crazy, universal hippie woo-woo shit. Try it out for 30 days. Celebrate the fuck out of every single person that you see, every single person that is doing something cool and great. Like, just live in the energy of celebration and see how your life changes. I guarantee you, really cool shit will start to happen. And
I love that.
You know, that this is one of my favorite things about being a coach is because I'm just celebrating clients all the time. So I'm living like 24/7 in this state of celebration. Not only, you know, they all get to celebrate their own successes, but I'm celebrating 20 people's successes now. I'm just like overflowing. And ultimately what it is what's the energy that I'm living in, right? I'm living in the energy of excitement, and I'm living in the energy of celebration. And so I just attract more things into my life to be excited about and to celebrate. And with all of that being said, I'm gonna hammer this home one more time to celebrate the fuck out of you and this album launch. It's so good. Everybody go out and listen to it. It is so rad. It's called Bend to the Light. Out now. Like, take the hour to just sit down and listen to an album from beginning to end. I guarantee you will love it. But I'm so excited for you. And also, I really want to celebrate 1 year of the Headliner Mindset and celebrate and thank all of the people that have been listening. Like, this is a pretty cool moment right now. I am just in so much gratitude for everybody that has listened, everybody that has shared, everybody that has sent me a DM, to all of my guests that have been on. Like, this is pretty fucking cool. I had no idea what I was getting into when I started this thing. I didn't even really have any game plan whatsoever. I just dove in, and what it has become has been so rad, and it wouldn't be possible without everybody listening and without all my guests joining as well. So thank you for hopping on, brother. You're the fucking man. I'm glad we could finally make this happen, and very excited for what's to come for you now that this album is out. I think a lot of great things are about to happen for you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Nick. I'm so glad we finally got to do this, and I'm stoked for you and your podcast journey, and it's been amazing just to watch your growth and transformation as well, and looking forward to tuning into future episodes as well.
Thanks, brother.